guys, Janet here, aka Gameonysus, and you are listening to Gameonysus Daily, your one-stop shop for video game news. It is Saturday, May 20th. Hopefully your weekend is going well. We're just going to jump into things. So we're starting off with a little piece of semi-obscure news, just a little update on things. So this PS4 exclusive third-person shooter, Senran Kagura, Peach Beach Splash, is getting a decent-sized update. This game is kind of in the genre of, I guess, sensual or sexy games, or whatever that genre would kind of be. So, games that are over the top in their depictions of women, and that's kind of one of their main shticks. So, this is a game that I'm pretty sure I've seen a couple times around, and actually looks like it might be pretty decent. I haven't checked it out personally. I've never played a game of that kind of subgenre of video games, but I definitely don't discount it offhand. It's just a little strange. Kind of looks like it has like a water gun component to it. Kind of makes me think of like a slutty Splatoon, basically. But that game's getting an update. It's currently a Japanese game, but it will be released in the West this summer. So keep your eyes peeled for that if it's something that interests you. And yeah, I just got a decent-sized update. So we're not sure if, our Western version will have that update in it. What the update includes is a multi-splash rule, which is like a capture the flag mode, and some new maps, and some additional episodes added. Once again, not super familiar with the game, but just kind of know it as, just a sexy third-person shooter for the PS4. Alright, continuing on, just kind of to add extra detail to Nintendo Switch's Test Punch that it's having for ARMS, which is coming up later this month, which once again is, of course, the month of May. The Test Punch will allow players to test all 10 characters, play local multiplayer, and try out Hoops mode via online, in exhibition matches. So it's kind of suggested that there won't be a couple of the characters in there, just based on the Japanese Twitter account. When it said, you could play as a certain number of characters, it kind of just showed, the characters we knew before the Direct. So not, Kid Cobra or Bite and Bark or Twin Telly. If I'm saying that name correctly, I'm not exactly sure. So those characters weren't featured in that image on this Japanese Twitter account, which kind of makes it seem like they're not going to be playable, but we'll see. If you're interested in testing out ARMS when that Test Punch drops, you can go ahead and actually download it now if you want, just so you can be extra ready to go for when it launches. You can just jump right into it. Keep in mind, this Test Punch is 1.4 gigabytes, so make sure you have that storage space ready. Make sure you got your memory cards good to go on your Switch to have space for that to be added on to whatever you got going on your Switch. Speaking of Nintendo, we also have Uniqlo's, if I'm saying that correctly. Their Nintendo-themed clothing range is now available. So this is something that has been teased or not necessarily teased, but kind of hyped up for quite a while. A couple people have sent me things regarding it, and it's basically just a series of Nintendo-themed shirts, and they're all fan-designed. So they're playing on different franchises that Nintendo has, and honestly, so first of all, Uniqlo, you can get their stuff online. It's just uniqlo.com, which is spelled UNIQLO.com, if you're interested in checking that out. They have other things as well, but this is a line they recently launched. Honestly, they're not that good. I had people send them to me just to be like, hey, check it out, or they're like, oh, super cool, check out these Nintendo designs, but honestly, they're not that great. Which is surprising because they're fan designs, and I see a lot of amazing things that fans produce in terms of art, and especially in terms of video games. So it's weird that they feel very safe and conservative, and just kind of I don't know. They don't really do it for me. It's not my style. I feel like a lot of the print is too big when it's patterned, and I don't vibe with that because it's kind of just too gamey, and then the print that's small is very what would be a good word for it? Basically, just very like unimpressive, or it just feels kind of uninspired. Like they have this, Pikachu T-shirt that's just a bunch of little Pikachu, and it's cute that it's subtle, but it's just kind of like I feel like I've seen this done before and possibly done better. Another beef I have with it, actually, now that I see that it's officially launched and I can look at the website, is like the women's shirts. They have like 7 women's shirts of this, but they have like, and they have a couple kids shirts. So they have men, women, and kids shirts. So they have 7 women's shirts. And for the men's shirts, they have 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 shirts. So they have like over double the amount of shirts for men versus women, which I am really not a fan of, just because I like to have options. I think everyone kind of does. And I never really got, like, especially with nerdy style clothing, and I point out nerd style clothing just because it seems, since a lot of those things are t-shirts, it's very easy to make, them in both genders, or also just to, like, I don't know, just it doesn't seem that complicated of a thing to do. Like, I don't know why you feel the need to make these separate, in the sense that, like, obviously women's clothing has a different cut than men's clothing, typically speaking, but I never got why there would be like a women's line and it's either limited from the men's line or is like completely different, and I'm like, I just want that design but in a women's shirt. Can I get that? And everyone's like, nope. And I really hate that. It's really frustrating as a female nerd who buys clothing that reflects those nerdums, that like it's really difficult to find stuff. And a lot of times I will like, shop around in the men's section because there aren't a lot of women's clothing options for video games and other nerdy things. And I feel like this is just another example of that. So that's really frustrating to see. As far as the designs themselves, once again, not super interested in them particularly, like just at least for my taste. But one of the shirts that I thought was actually kind of cute, even though the print is kind of too big, was the Animal Crossing shirt, which of course is only available in kids. So I feel like there's not, for me personally, that many designs I would be interested in, and a lot of the ones that I am interested in are not available in women's clothing. So I'm just not really gonna check this out, but if you're intrigued by it, I definitely suggest at least looking at it and seeing if it's something that sparks your interest. I think it is really cool that they're designed by like fans, but I'm just kind of surprised that they're not, like, I'm surprised that I'm not as interested in that, because on paper it sounds like exactly what I would want, but in practice it just didn't really resonate with me. Alright, so that's my spiel on Nintendo based clothing, basically. So I want to also just add in, it was kind of a little bit of a slow news day today, at least from the feeds I follow, so if you have, things to suggest, definitely let me know. It's one thing I came across, so I don't talk about everything I see in terms of news. I kind of pick out pieces that I think are really important or pieces that I think are really interesting, because of course, there are little updates happening to games, there are, interviews always going on, there's always something to talk about in game news to an extent, but I try to pick out things that I think will be interesting. Today was a little light on that, but one thing that I found interesting just as a theme is a lot of people are talking about the Switch and what it does or doesn't have on it. So a lot of things I see are like, oh, this thing is going to be ported onto Switch, like the small indie game, like, but in Japan, so obviously it's not as relevant to my Western listeners, or people that, live in my area, which is North America. Although, of course, once again, Switch region free. So, you could get those games if you just do a couple extra steps. Totally possible. So that's one reason I don't report on that, but it's just interesting how many of like those little stories I see of like, oh, this game in like 9 months, or like this game is, being said that it'll come over to Switch. I also saw a lot, or at least several times today, of people pointing out that like the Switch probably won't get Destiny 2, which is, that's pretty not even news at this point. Also, it's funny because this is news on like what's not happening, basically, is what this is. So it's like non-news news, which is super trippy to see as well. So I saw a couple articles, about the fact that Destiny 2 will most likely not be coming to Switch, which, I don't know why you would think it would be. Like, Nintendo's not had third-party support for forever, and even though I'm hoping, always hoping to see more on that front because I'm a Nintendo fan, I also know that, like, come on. Like, no one's really, really jumping on board of that. So that was interesting to see a bit of that. Speaking of Switch madness a little bit, I've seen so. I wasn't even going to mention this on this podcast because it's pretty old, like a really old story. So I didn't feel like it was relevant for the time I started this podcast, but I've seen this literally every day I've been looking for news. The article that's about the fact that the lewd gesture got patched out of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is, it's if you somehow don't know this, it's a gesture where when the Squid Kids will, when they pass you up or do a good move, as a taunt, they'll kind of turn around and raise their fist, but they'll also grab their arm while they raise their fist, and that's known as, an up yours kind of gesture is what that means. And I've literally seen this, every single day, at least 5 times a day. Like, granted, this feed that I'm following, that I made on Twitter, it's not, that extensive. It's got, 13, pretty big sources to go through. But, literally, I see this article several times a day for the last, 4 days. And, it's funny because I guess the interest there is that Nintendo is, such a conservative, appropriate company that maybe it's funny that they had an up yours symbol in there, and that's where the intrigue is. I've just been intrigued by how much people are pushing this story as a thing. So I unfortunately had to kind of mention it on here, even though I wasn't playing on originally. Okay, cool. So for the very last bit of news, there are 4 new Overwatch skins that have been revealed. They're for Bastion, Pharah, Soldier 76, and Zarya. Did I say that right? Zarya? Yeah. Once again, don't play Overwatch a whole lot. But something I thought was kind of interesting based off this whole idea of Overwatch skins in general is an article that was written by Cecilia over at Kotaku, which was entitled "Blizzard May Have Clarified Pharah's Controversial Background in Overwatch." And it kind of, if you're interested in that, definitely recommend checking it out. It was an interesting read for sure. And it kind of talks about this issue of cultural appropriation in Overwatch specifically in terms of just the type of skins they use for their characters. So, with Pharah, there's been the drama of her having this skin that basically has Native American overtones to it. And based on lore, Pharah is presumably Egyptian to some extent, so it's okay, well, that's kind of cultural appropriation in some way. There was also earlier, which this article references, a good amount of drama regarding a character, Symmetra, there you go, Symmetra, her Devi skin, which is, kind of basically a version of a Hindu goddess. So that kind of sparked some conversation as well on whether or not that was appropriate to have in a game, whether or not it was, insensitive to other people's cultures and identities and backgrounds, and all of that. So it's just been interesting to kind of see how that's been unfolding. They showed a couple other examples in this article as well, so I suggest checking that out. And yeah, it's just always interesting, I think, to think, well, not just interesting, but also just really important for us as video game fans, and then obviously the video game developers themselves, to be mindful of those aspects. I think we, a lot of times in the gaming community, since video games are not, reality, obviously, there are these worlds we create, I think sometimes we try to look at them as their own thing and act like they're kind of, not touchable by our real world issues that we have. So it's it's not really cultural appropriation because this isn't even real. I mean, yeah, all these characters have some type of race, but really it's about the fantasy and the lore. And I think that's kind of the easy way out. And I encourage all of you guys to be, more mindful of it and just kind of have those conversations or thoughts about it. There's no concrete answers to any of this stuff for the most part, but I think it's just something interesting to think about, and it's something I've been kind of been intrigued in following in terms of Overwatch specifically because of all the different skins, and they are interesting and maybe even well designed or good looking, but that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that there might be a level of insensitivity there in the way that's being used. And I think it's something to be mindful of, especially in a game like Overwatch, where the characters are such a crucial component to the game and the lore is such a big deal, and that's like why people love Overwatch. So I think that passion that fans have for Overwatch kind of amplifies the importance of being mindful in terms of these things. And for the most part, I think Blizzard's done a pretty good job with that. I think they have been thoughtful, and it's good to see articles like the one that Cecilia wrote for Kotaku kind of highlighting these tensions that exist in such a beloved franchise. So that about does it for today's episode of Gameonysus Daily, of just kind of our news coverage. Once again, kind of a lighter day, so I decided to dig deeper in some of these topics. If there are topics you guys want to see covered, segments you want me to add in that you think would be good, different sources that you think I should be checking out, you can actually see the list of sources I go through. If you look on my Twitter under lists, I have video game news, its own list. So if you're interested in checking that out, I encourage you to do so. Once again, you guys can hit me up on social media, mostly Twitter, but I am also on Instagram. I am on both of those platforms under the handle Gameonysus, which is once again Gameonysus, Gameonysus. Definitely comment on this audio feed. Send me a tweet. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Your reactions to some of these news stories. Any things that you guys saw that you really would like to have seen addressed in this episode. News stories that I didn't mention that you'd like to see covered. Sources that you want me to check out. And I guess my ending question for you guys is, what are some tensions you felt when playing video games in terms of, overarching social issues? Or to put it more simply, what are some games where you thought about cultural appropriation, or maybe even thought about the opposite of that? So, cultural appreciation, or ways that different, groups have been represented positively. I know for me personally, I really enjoyed, what is the name of the game? Never Alone, which was representative of Inuit culture, Alaskan culture, and I thought that was really well done. I think it's always hard to kind of say when things are well done in terms of race and culture when you're not from those races and cultures that are represented in that piece of media. But I thought that was really interesting and well done. It even included like some additional video clips where they were like interviews with other Alaskan people in regards to the lore they were drawing on for that game. So that the game is very much rooted in the culture that's representing, not just from the characters they choose, but also the story and the gameplay itself is very much rooted in culture. A game that I was like not so sure about was like Guacamelee, which it's based in Mexican culture to an extent. It's kind of like cheeky in its representation. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially because the dev team was fairly racially diverse, and there definitely were Latin Americans represented in that development team. But some of its portrayals are just kind of like, I don't know. Is this really something that is positive, or rather, the opposite of that? Is this negative? Is this too stereotypical? Is it just a matter of the lack of representation that makes this have more weight to it? There were a lot of things I was wrestling with in that, and it was just kind of an interesting moment to reflect on what does good representation look like, and what do we want and not want from representation in terms of real life cultures in video game spaces. So once again, my question for you guys is, what's a game that you think handles different cultures really well, or what's a game that you think does it poorly, or even an in-between, a game where you're like, hey, I'm not so sure about this, I was on the fence about it. What do you guys think? that kind of thing. Definitely let me know your responses to that question. Either you can comment below on this, or you can respond to me on Twitter, which once again, my handle is Gameonysus. That's Gameonysus. Thanks for checking this out, guys, and I will see you here tomorrow. Bye.